Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. This is day 3 of Zoom into LEAF Marque week. We've had a wonderful week so far. We've had some fantastic surgeries and no doubt we'll have another wonderful one today. This is a week celebrating the fantastic work of LEAF Marque growers across the world. And it will culminate with the launch of our 9th Global Impacts Report, which will be launched on Friday morning at 10 o'clock, and we hope you can join us for that as well. But today we're talking all about policy and the politics of feeding the world sustainably, the dreams, the drivers, and the decision makers. And we are delighted to have 2 very special guests with us. First of all, we are joined by Sarah Mukherjee, CEO of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. And we are also joined by Cedric Porter, Director at Supply Intelligence, renowned agricultural journalist, and of course a member of the LEAF board. So we're very grateful to you both for joining us today. I'm just going to run through a couple of housekeeping rules. First of all, just to say, if you do have a question for our panelists, if you can use the chat function. If you hover over the chat button, if you hover at the bottom of your screen and press the chat button, and then you can submit your questions that way. If you can let me know if it's for one particular panelist or if it's for everyone in general. Questions will remain anonymous and we will try and answer as many questions as we can. The session today will last 1 hour, and as I say, yes, we will try and get as many questions answered as possible. Before we make a start though, I'm just going to run a quick poll for everyone just to get a feel for the room, see how everyone's doing. So I'm going to launch a question now, and of course, because this session is all about policy, that's exactly what these questions are going to be about. So the first one, which will be appearing on your screen now, at least it should be, is what do you think are the most important areas to be addressed by policymakers going forward? So I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer that. There's 5 options. You've got climate change and carbon emissions, trade and food security, environmental sustainability, improving biodiversity, or pollution and waste management. And you can pick as many options as you like. There's no one right or wrong answer, of course. So yes, fire away and we'll see what kind of answers we come up with. And there is, I can safely say already that there is one clear leader, and I think you can possibly all guess what it is. Let's just get a couple more in, I think. Yep, okay. Right, let's get the results. And as you can see there, 90% for climate change and carbon emissions. Yes, so a clear winner there, closely followed by environmental sustainability, trade and food security, pollution and waste management, and then followed by trade and food security also in there as well, and improving biodiversity, 41%. So yes, a good mixture of answers there, I think you'll agree. Great, thank you. We will run another poll later just before our question and answer session, but for now, I will now hand over to LEAF CEO Caroline Drummond.
Thank you very much indeed, Sam. And yeah, interesting poll. I didn't realise there was going to be a key leader there. I thought everyone a winner should be a winner, but yes, that's going to be interesting if today's discussion will draw out how we get the balance right. And you know, I think for those of you that have come for the last 2 days, and for those of you who didn't get a chance to see, we have had already some brilliant farmers who have highlighted what LEAF Marque does from their point of view, and you know, just this amazing piece of how they are driving change through improvements of, in fact, things like carbon footprinting, right through to biodiversity, and of course, producing quality food. And yesterday we were it was lovely to have the executive director of Waitrose join us, and also Mia from Jordan's Farm Partnership and Jordan's. So we've had already a very good lineup. And I like today's title, and I have to say we did get apologies from the Secretary of State and the Chief Minister in Jersey, because they are both extremely busy. But wow, we've got 2 fantastic speakers today. But the politics of feeding the world sustainably, the dreams, the drivers, and the decisions. And I think, you know, to start off with, and many of you might be familiar with the quote from Walt Disney, which is, if you can dream it, you can do it. And I think this is going to be so important for the whole delivery of sustainability, because the reality is, if we can think it, if we know there's a problem, then actually that's how we can start identifying ways to really mend it. And from that point of view, for us, LEAF Marque has really tried to tackle on some of the wicked problems that are becoming increasingly wicked, that we have to address on a practical day-to-day basis for farming. And the other thing is, you know, the drivers and the decisions, well, of course, the marketplace, but also policy is incredibly important to provide the framework of making sure that actually, first of all, we know what the direction of travel is. Then, in addition to that, we have enabling legislation to support that, to help accelerate change and obviously support market failures. So that's a critical area. And I think when we start looking at farming and the challenges, I'm sure many of you will have heard me talk about the days of the week before, but you know, on Monday we wanted quantity, Tuesday we want quantity and we want cheapness, Wednesday we want quantity, cheapness, and we want quality, Thursday of course we still want quantity, cheapness, quality, we want traceability. By Friday, throw in the environment and animal welfare, Saturday carbon footprinting, Sunday plastic free, and actually we're starting to move into the next week where, golly, you know, we do still need food and it needs to be produced sustainably. So therefore the importance of the drivers in that sustainability piece is absolutely so critical. And when you start looking at, you know, what are the puppeteers, you know, who are the puppeteers that help lead this? Well, that's the framing of the Sustainable Development Goals. We need to be delivering those by 2030. And they're not, well, they're different, and they're a development of the Millennium Development Goals, but they bring in the importance of developing countries and developed countries as well. There is, of course, COP26, COP15 with the biological diversity area, and we've just a few weeks ago had Davos, where the risks and impact of the big businesses and the World Economic Forum were really highlighted. And what came to the top? Well, climate change. And in addition to that, what was the likelihood? Failure to mitigate against climate change is the huge risk. So therefore, policy drivers to support businesses and obviously, you know, ourselves as individual in making the right choices is something very critical. And we live in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So getting that balance right in terms of the balance of politics with a little p, the politics of how important it is for us as an industry to collaborate. Sustainability is not a competition. Sustainability is something that we have all got to work together very effectively for. And that's why for us as an organization, the importance of working globally has been so critical with our farmers right across the 27 countries that we work with, our European partners through the Horizon 2020 projects, not to mention the many businesses on top of that as well. So I think, you know, there's also the politics with the big P. And that's where, a lot of the discussion today is going to be. We're seeing radical change, obviously, here from a UK perspective with the introduction of the ELM and the Sustainable Farming Initiative. And many of you will be involved in some of that project work. But in addition to that, actually knowing that the test and trials are going to be so important in making sure that government is able to balance effectively the relationship between this new trust model and developing voluntary approaches such as LEAF Marque through earned recognition, and we are recognizing through driving that change. So we've got a wonderful test and trials. We've just nearly finished it now, where we've been looking with farmers on helping kind of push them up the road towards LEAF Marque, and where we've done training, where we've done support as well, and the importance of one-to-one advice in terms of really definition and working with the brilliant Andy Guy as well as the LEAF team. So then there's changes are going on with consultations in Scotland and of course Wales. And then when we look over to Europe, the Farm to Fork focus is on climate footprints, global transition, new opportunities and resilience. There is nothing there that in terms of as a UK we would disagree with at all. It's core. And so from that point of view, it's going to be interesting. Some of the ambitions there are pretty strong. They are looking for a delivery by 2024 of sustainable labelling, potentially through traffic light systems. And I think the real opportunity for us as LEAF Marque in particular is that LEAF Marque could be a provider for those feeding into that that farm to fork and the sustainability labelling piece, because of the importance of credibility, robustness, traceability and transparency, and all of those areas really critically highlighted yesterday as well by James Elliott from Waitrose, really saying how, you know, that's what drives their importance as well. So we're going to see new trust models, and we're going to see acceptable equivalence. So it now gives me huge pleasure to welcome Sarah Mukherjee. I've known Sarah for many, well, gosh, 20 years now, Sarah. Usually other way around, you asking me the questions, but yay, I get to ask you the questions this time. So pleased and welcome. You've got a relatively new job. Please tell us about that, because that fits into this space, but also, can you explain a little bit from your point of view where you really see this importance of partnership and new trust models with governments?
Yeah, well, thank you, Caroline. It's a real pleasure, absolute delight. It's always a delight to be part of the, albeit for a couple of hours or so, part of the LEAF family. I was at one point on your advisory board, and there was so much joy to be had in the days when we could not be on house arrest and actually go out and see people's farms. The innovation and the passion around getting to LEAF standard, and the pride that people had when they were part of that LEAF family and really felt that they'd been embedded in part of those core values. So I'm delighted to be here. A little bit about IEMA. I joined in June under lockdown, so I've only met about 3 of the team. We've got a team of 30 odd face to face, and most of them I've met through a screen, but it just makes you think quite fundamentally, I think, about what an organization is. I mean, whether it's a set of people who share a collective vision and belief and want to get to a particular place, or is it people who sit in a bricks and mortar office from 9 to 5, hoping and wishing and praying they were somewhere else. Although I think at the moment, the reverse might be true for many of us. I never ever thought that we'd think, oh, the office, that sounds so nice. They have nice coffee and you can read the paper. and you're not in your kitchen, for example. So IEMA is the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. We are 17,000 strong, 75 corporate partners in more than 100 countries around the world. And we support environment and sustainability professionals on their professional journey. We have, as you can imagine, people in every sector, from food and farming through to construction, FCMG, in pretty much every area, because every area of UK PLC and internationally now is very interested in getting to that zero carbon journey. So we're mainly about zero carbon and net zero gain and net biodiversity gain as well. But I think it's really key, and as you've just highlighted, good carbon management is not a proxy for good environmental management. And I think we've been so desperate to try and get the message over that we need to move towards a zero carbon economy, that sometimes the biodiversity and environmental management has taken a little bit of a backseat. And I think people are beginning to realize now that the two are not necessarily, that they can be the same. And when you get those benefits, those cumulative benefits, they can be amazing. But we do have to remember that there is a very fragile web of environment and ecosystems that you also have to support when you're looking to move towards net zero.
No, thank you for that. And that's, yes, for us, that integrated farm management is such a key area. And it's that sort of seesaw of balance and trade-offs and things like that that's, absolutely key. And in terms of, from your perspective, we're seeing new policy coming through, and we've got actually 10 years, well, gosh, it's now 9, in delivering against the SDGs and sort of counting down. How do you see businesses enabling policy, and obviously vice versa, and where LEAF Marque can really help government drive that change?
Well, I think, and as you said, we've known each other for 20 years. Obviously, neither of us, we met when we were 4, obviously.
Yes, obviously. Yes, we were very young.
just putting that out. But I think in a way, rather depressingly, the overall ask from business, and whether you are a smallholder taking your animals to be locally slaughtered and sell them in the farmers market, or if you've got 10,000 acres in Lincolnshire and you're mashing your own potato and running your own supply chains, and every other sector in between, all anybody has ever asked for is clarity and consistency. Clarity on where the end point is supposed to be, and consistency in the regulations that support that move to the end point. And I'll be honest, I don't think, I'm being wildly political when I say that really hasn't happened yet. There has been a huge amount of, even though we have a multi-party agreement for the Climate Change Act, and even though everybody says they want to get to the same place, there seems to be a lot of ways of getting there. And I have to say, if I was a farmer looking to try to plan for the next 5 to 10 years, first, and I think the way you've described it, that, the Farmers' Week is a really good way of doing it. First of all, you've been told you've got to provide food. Well, yes, that's pretty fundamental part of farming, I would have thought. But also you've got to do it in an environmentally sustainable way. Absolutely, yes, we all agree with that. And we've got to be careful about the carbon. Oh, and while you're there, can you get as many benefits as you possibly can out of the things that you're doing? And can you make sure that you're flexible enough in case we need to change those rules, which we do pretty regularly, to be able to just chop and change if you need to, bearing in mind that you do have a plan for farming or your planting that obviously you've got to think about well in advance to make it as sustainable as possible. And while you're there, can you also support, which again is really important, access and diversity and inclusion, and make sure the people who are paying for elms are the ones who are getting some of the benefits of that environment. So there is a huge menu of things that people have to do, and I think it boils down to feeling that you have the confidence that today's regulations are still going to be there tomorrow. And I think governments, obviously we have a 5-year political cycle, but there needs to be a real commitment to clarity, and I know that DEFRA are aware of this, but also an ability to get hold of the best advice and the best practice. And I think this is where LEAF has a real USP. The farm visits, the workshops, and the program of events that you have that allow farmers to share learning, because it's really difficult to find out what best practice is if you're sitting on your own on the farm. Social media helps, but actually there's nothing quite like going out and seeing how other people are doing it.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for that. And as you say, I mean, that whole area of what we're able to do as LEAF Marque is a little bit more beyond certification as well. Not only have we got a cracking good certification scheme, but it's the piece beyond that as well that's so absolutely important. And I think, I mean, one of the things you've been quite provocative, as you always are, Sarah, in terms of saying, right, we've got this wonderful multi-party agreement, but, is somebody actually, what's the saying, is it, holding a candle to their feet? Is that the one? And so I guess the Office of Environmental Protection is meant to be doing, well, will be doing that. Do you think that will be good enough, or should we all be saying, right, we've got our part, this is what we'll bring to the table. Government, how are you going to work with us as well?
Well, I've been lucky enough to meet Dame Glynis, who's chairing just actually this morning for a meeting, and I think she has a really clear view, and I know people who've worked with her and said that she's absolutely the right person for the job. They're progressing. I mean, obviously it must be frustrating because we haven't got an environment bill yet passed, and until that's passed, you don't have the regulatory or the legal framework to support the work that you're doing. So there has to be, I guess, some work done before that, in order to prepare for the legislation actually coming in. But I think there will be a huge weight of expectation. And when you think everybody will be looking from environmental NGOs through farming to pretty much every other sector for everything, you know, and I would imagine the spread of expectation will be from, you know, don't make this an environment, no pun intended, where you actually can't do business, because unless a farmer is in the black, they're not going to be able to be in the green. Two, we want to see world-leading environmental management and sustainability and a rapid decarbonisation of the economy. Now, I'm not saying they are mutually exclusive, but there is, you know, there will be a huge expectation, without wishing to overcook it, but I remember when Barack Obama came in as president of the United States, everybody expected him to do, be the kind of solution, the lock, the key that unlocked everything. And no one could actually manage that breadth of expectation. I mean, obviously it's very, very early days for the OEP, and I think they're very aware that there will be a lot of people very passionate about what they're doing. But you know, I think that one hopes that they feel that they've got the tools in the Environment Bill to support them, and that I think it's going to be the proof of the pudding being in the eating once it's up and running, and we've been able to see the sort of reports that are coming out and the sort of pushback or rigor that will be around it.
I would agree. I was lucky enough to sit on Dame Glenys Stacey's report writing process, and for the last Red Tape one, and she's amazing. I definitely agree with you. She's the right person in the right job at the right time, and she takes no prisoners. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be really important. As you say, you know, we've got a trade bill still to come through, and the Environment Bill. Obviously the Agriculture Act's now happened, but there is a lot more to have, you know, to go forwards, and she will keep on prodding. She's a very, very smart cookie. And I think, you know, from your perspective, you've talked about sort of this whole area of, you know, the work that you're doing with the IEMA, and you know, how do you work with government, and how do you see the sort of the partnership between government and businesses? Because I think we often look for government to almost kind of be the solution for farm businesses, and that's a huge danger, because at the end of the day, farming, you know, is not being run by government. It's there, you know, and this was actually one of the things that Dame Glenys said to me, you know, legislation is there to prevent harm.
Yeah.
And we often forget that, and policy is just the framing for how that legislation fits. So we prioritize, like we want to get carbon and the climate change piece sorted, we want to get water quality sorted and air quality and things like that. So how do you see that working, and do you have some good examples from your business that the industry, we could take as an industry?
Yes, and you know, please, I don't want anybody who is involved in farming policy, because I know how difficult it is to navigate those waters, to feel that this is in any way a criticism, because you know, it's difficult. But I'll give you one example, and I'll give you maybe a little bit of a sense of the way that we at IEMA work, because we work at devolved, at Westminster, at EU, and at UN level. So we advise. We've got members of the team advising the World Bank, UNFCCC. Chairing ISO groups, as well as working within DEFRA and other departments towards zero carbon and towards sustainability. And that is, and you know, you're being very, very, you're hiding your light under a bushel here, Caroline, because you're very, very adept at this yourself, being able to provide a solution for a problem. And the example I was going to give was during the Green Deal. Do you remember the Green Deal? The far off days of the Cameron administration. And I was working with the water industry at the time. And obviously, 20% of your electricity bill goes on heating your water. If you didn't know that, yeah, turn the thermostat down on your water tank, because it's a huge amount, relatively speaking. And we put a load of measures together, which we thought would be absolutely fit into the Green Deal and would be marvellous. And so we presented all of this. None of it got in. And I went to go and talk to the civil servant who was involved with the Green Deal, and basically have a bit of a moan and say, well, we're a bit disappointed, and we thought, you know, it seemed fairly obvious for us this would be a good idea. And literally before my behind had sat on the chair in the meeting, they said, look, I know what you're going to say. Yes, everybody's disappointed. And it was, you know, one of those rare moments that he was so fed up. I think there was a kind of real truth in this. Everybody's disappointed. but that's not going to help me at all. Unless you have a solution, and unless you're going to be able to find ways of supporting me, really, there's not much point us having this conversation. And it wasn't a very long meeting, as you can imagine, because that wasn't what I prepared for. But I remembered that ever since. And actually, the way you frame it is, how can we support you? And I think there is a real appetite in all government departments, we find, to really understand what businesses need and how they are going to be able to get the points that you made, the objectives that policymakers are setting, how they can turn that into easy to manage methods of getting that across. Because obviously, if you want to drive carbon down to zero, you've got to bring people with you. You can tax people and incentivize them and legislate them, but also you've got to support people on that journey. And so being able to go in with case studies, always case studies are a really good way, practical examples of where this works, which is why I think every farmer in the country has a perfect opportunity in a farm visit to show people best practice and how they can demonstrate what does work and what is more challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Yes, the sort of my favorite saying is, when all's said and done, there's a lot more said than done. And there's a lot of this talk, and it's got to be solution driven. And that's why we're always so proud that our demonstration farms are can-do farmers. And, we look across our LEAF Marque growers, and I know Jenny and Lucy Redmore and Jess from the LEAF Marque team are on this today. And, really, that's just unbelievable, incredible. Some of our LEAF Marque growers as well. You guys are amazing, because you're coming up with solutions, and that's it's going back to the Walt Disney quote, isn't it? Really, in terms of if you can dream it, you can do it. And I think we've got to be driving those solutions. So absolutely, really key. Because what's the other saying? What I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. What I do, I understand. And that peer-to-peer learning of, I see it. Yes, yes, this is delivering, and I own it. And that's something that's so critical. Yes, definitely come up with solutions. And yesterday we had a great meeting with DEFRA, actually, Jenny and myself, where it was very solution focused. So that's always good news. Okay. And what's the point of complaining about something? Because, all that's going to happen is fine. But actually, government have given us the opportunity now to co-design. And wow, let's drive change, because
grasp it. Absolutely.
We've got to make it happen. Brilliant. Well, thank you, Sarah. I know there'll be a few questions from Sam and the audience in a few minutes as well. Cedric, well, I have known Cedric even longer than I've known you, Sarah. Cedric was one of my students at Shuttleworth Agricultural College. So I have known Cedric now 33 years, Cedric, man and boy. So really delighted that you can join us. As people will know, Cedric not only sits as our vice chairman on the LEAF board, but actually what he is a brilliant editor. And also, you're just so good at analysing things, Cedric, and in particular, a lot of the politics in there. So can you sort of highlight, from your perspective, a bit of a take and perhaps sort of take us to a little bit of the history, but the here and now for the political situation that we find ourselves in, and really sort of going through there where farmers and obviously, those farmers that are delivering against sustainability can kind of make some wins.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. Yeah, I think we were probably 4 as well when you were a very
by then I was
young lecturer, immature lecturer, mature student.
Benjamin Button here or whatever.
Yeah, so yeah, and it's always been a pleasure for me working with LEAF, both as a journalist, but then with latterly on the LEAF board as well, and just seeing those farms and I think the great thing about LEAF, sorry, there's just a plug for LEAF if you like, is responding to a lot of the issues that really hit at any one time. So it was 30 years ago that you were looking at the environment, linking, and the fantastic name, linking environment farming, and then sort of moving on through that, and then sort of through to public engagement with things like Open Farm Sunday and LEAF Education, now looking more at nutrition, and of course with climate change as well, and carbon reduction, very much sort of taking that on board and taking it very seriously, and being very solution driven to this to these issues, not a talking shop. So that's and I think the leaf farmers themselves really sort of demonstrating that. So I suppose I think we will look back at this time. I think if you look back at sort of over the last 30, 40, 50 plus years, any sort of time, you can see there's sort of big changes happening. But of course, we've seen perhaps in the last 5 years some of those much larger changes, and we will look back on this time as being one of enormous change, and the identity perhaps of the UK changing both internally and globally, and how it operates, but also and I suppose I think there's probably some work to be done in terms of international reputation for the UK and rebuilding it over the last sort of 5 years. That perhaps the UK's reputation for fairly incisive political thinking and operation has been dented in the last 5 years, whatever side of the Brexit argument you might be on. It's not been a smooth passage out of Europe. And then of course, with the coronavirus crisis as well, that's there's been elements of success, and we've perhaps been latterly more successful with controlling it than we were initially. But again, some of the reputation and there are benefits of going out on a limb perhaps with some of the vaccinations, but whether we're being seen as sort of a collegiate player with other parts of Europe is interesting. But I think in terms of there is a massive opportunity though for the UK, and we've got COP26 coming up. I think a lot of us not quite sure what COP26. I think if you ask most people what COP26 is, they'd think it's another very weak sequel in a police movie show. But I think we need to grab that opportunity. This is an opportunity for the UK to take that sort of lead, and aside from coronavirus, and I think coronavirus has highlighted the global nature of issues. I think everyone sort of thinks that climate change and the environmental crisis and biodiversity crisis alongside are the major issues that we will have to deal with as a world together. And if the UK can be a major part of helping to facilitate some of those solutions, it can't come up with all the solutions itself. It shouldn't come up with all the solutions itself. But if it's a facilitator with that, so I'd like to see in the next few months some more direction of what we're expecting from COP, so to get perhaps the UK population more involved with it, but for some of the sort of direction of where we might be going with COP26 and beyond, and just really and the world is going to be looking at us as we have a new agricultural policy, a new environmental policy. There will be some looking at us and not wishing us an awful lot of goodwill. There might be others who will be not that upset if we do mess things up. But I think we do have an opportunity to have a different system, and to build that. We will get things wrong along the path. But again, very much farmers, very much focused and being a part of that solution. And I think we do have a government that sort of realises that they do have to engage with stakeholders and farmers, and so us coming up with solutions is not a bad thing.
No, and I think that's for certain. Our experience is DEFRA are working very hard in the engagement piece. The thing is going to be analysing all the results of the tests and trials, and right through to the sort of the framing for the ELM. And yes, I think as you've just said though, COP, I love the fact that yes, the sort of police camera action type sort of event or activity, but the reality is we should be having a year of climate action, which should have started last November, and there isn't that public ownership, and indeed even industry ownership. We're really pleased as LEAF, we have signed up to Race to Zero, which is again really important, and I think what we are going to be working on and what's going to be quite important for us from a LEAF Marque perspective is we've got a lot of data, a lot of evidence, and actually how do we help farmers translate that into that this is what we are delivering for positive climate action, so that farmers are not having to do more work on top of all the wonderful things they're doing, but actually can start translating to demonstrate this is what I am doing now. And I think that's going to be something that's really critical in this year of climate action that's so, well, it's not just a year, is it? It's got to be a lifetime. And in terms, from your perspective, Cedric, in terms of seeing the changes that have happened from us being, you know, really central to a lot of the European discussions and decisions to now being the UK, and that in itself is sort of a challenged, devolved sort of country's place as well. How do you see organisations like LEAF and obviously LEAF Marque, who, you know, spread that global piece, really try and engage with everybody, because I think that's going to be probably quite important.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I speak to a lot to people across the EU. The general feeling is, yeah, that there is a loss of influence. They're sad at that loss of influence. There is, you know, and a feeling where, you know, you do have to go alone now. You know, you can't sort of cry and say, oh, we wish we were back and whatever. You do have to, the UK does have to make its own path. So I think, yeah, but there's, from a LEAF point of view, when I speak about LEAF, and this is beyond Europe as well, there is real interest in it. People are very impressed with its scope, with its impact, the fact that it is global, it's the fact that it's in nearly 30 countries. And I think that is important, that it is not just a UK standard, that it is an international standard. And I think we should be bold and you know, perhaps even from a policy point of view, if farmers are meeting LEAF standards, if farmers in other parts of the world are meeting LEAF standards, then that perhaps should be should allow them or ease them into more trading with the UK. It's fine for us to say, well, we expect everything to be to our standards, but then if people from other countries are then proving it with our own sort of standard systems, then we should welcome that rather than push people away from that. Some standards can be a little bit too nationalistic, if you like. So, and I think the great thing again with LEAF, it does engage with people around the world, and members of ICEAL, the International Association, and things like that. I think so. For me, again, it sort of goes back to some of the problems I had with the Brexit argument that was very much a nationalistic, let's look back in on ourselves, we want to recreate the world as it was in 1950. For me, we really have to be looking at what the world's going to be looking like in 2050, and how can the UK play an important part of making that a good world to be in 2050.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, part of that, it does have to be that wonderful balance. You know, as I mentioned yesterday, you know, some of the children that went out onto Open Farm Sunday when we first started are now at university. You know, by 2050, goodness me, they're going to be a lot older and very much more in the powers of influence. And I guess that's the fantastic opportunity we've got. There's a sort of youthful disillusionment, I think is what it's called, that sort of happens in the millennials at the moment, and that sort of that anger, that passion, that energy actually is something that if we can kind of divert that more to supporting the innovations, the technology, the new food systems that we're going to be, that's a real win. And I know that, Cedric, I mean, you've worked with a lot of hugely innovative partners. You work over in America, you worked in the Netherlands for a number of years as well. So from that perspective, have you seen some really great examples of sort of winning approaches?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the Dutch example is quite, well, they've got this sort of idea of the circular economy, but they do very much have this sort of equal partner. So they've got a very strong academic element, there's a very strong business element, and there's a very strong government element. And they all seem to pull together better. And government obviously has a role in regulating as well, and so it can't always be the friend of business. But for countries, you do need to encourage your businesses to operate and operate strongly. So yeah, that would be the sort of good examples. And I think I suppose it's sort of putting trust in people, and we perhaps haven't trusted, and there have been. I mean, we do have to acknowledge from where we have come over in the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, it's 20 years ago since we had that other virus stalking the country of foot and mouth disease, and how much we've sort of changed through that time. In some ways there was a failure of regulation then, and a distrust of business with regulation. And now I think with assurance schemes have played a big role in that. And you can see it around the world that actually British products are pretty well trusted. And a lot of that is about its food quality and assurance, which to me, reporting, and Sarah, you were reporting 20 plus years ago on BSE and foot and mouth disease, to turn it round from being almost, being seen as a sort of world pariah for the food that we produce, to actually then to produce it here. So I think there are some very good examples in the UK, and I think other parts of the world will be looking at, and are already looking at, what we are doing. And we've just got to be a little bit more proud of it as well, I think, and sort of pull together to help push that.
Yes, I mean, I totally, that pride is so critical. And James Bailey, the executive director at Waitrose, as he said yesterday, I go back to this trust, transparency and honesty. And, yes, we haven't always got it right. The bigger challenge, though, going back to a point you made earlier as well, though, is we haven't got that much time to make mistakes. And so from that point of view, being honest, but actually saying, well, I can't solve this problem. Is there somebody else out there who is trying to tackle it and has got a solution? And I guess that also supports this drive for openness, transparency and change in some of these areas. Yeah,
no, certainly. I think it is. And that's what I hate to bang out how great LEAF is, but actually I think it's one of its strengths is it's people involved with it are always asking, they are proud in what they do and want to share, but they're also very sort of questioning of what they do. And they're always, well, actually, I could be doing this better. I think there's it's the British is best, period type argument. I can't sort of buy into that. Why? Well, you got to prove it to me. It's not best because it's British. The motorcycle industry, British motorcycle industry said, yeah, well, British is best, and then see what happened to that. So it's having that honesty, there's having a framework and having that honesty behind it, and a questioning and saying, well, actually, no, we haven't done this quite right. How can we do this better? And how can we share that with others? If it's not a competitive issue, to increase the whole of the industry.
Yes, and I think it goes back to the point Sarah made earlier around peer-to-peer learning. And, there's nothing more exciting than bringing a group of farmers together and hearing their enthusiasm, the ideas that, as you say, share, experiment, adapt. And we know, we've sort of got behind us this tidal wave of climate change as well, with a changing environment, which means doing the same is not going to, well, all it will deliver is actually us going backwards. And yeah, I'll often say, well, if I said to you, my relationship with my husband is sustainable, quite frankly, that's kind of boring. Obviously, it's beyond sustainability, but, and that's something that's really key with sustainability. It's got to be kind of keep on driving the change of it all. So Sam, I'm sure we've got some wonderful questions, and thank you already, Cedric and Sarah, for answering my questions. I've got a million more, but I'm sure there are many in the audience. Sam.
Yep, thank you everyone who's submitted questions so far. Just a reminder, use the chat function and we will try and answer your as many questions as we can. Before we do that though, I'm just going to launch our second poll, which is all about assurance schemes. And the question, which is coming up on your screen now, is do you think assurance schemes are an important aspect in policy going forward? So if I can get you all to submit your answers. And I can already confirm that there's a unanimous answer as far as this is concerned. Which bodes well for Leaf. Yes, which is excellent news. Yes, so yeah, yes, completely. Actually, 100%. There you go.
Excellent.
Close it now.
What we like to see. Yeah, no one's allowed to answer now. That's it. We've got that. Right. So first question I've got here, and first of all, a comment to what you said earlier, Sarah. That this particular attendee is in agreement with you. There is far too much information out there and not enough clarity on this, and also a level playing field needs to be secured. The question really is, how do we get regulators and food retailers to agree to one standard such as LEAF so that suppliers can undertake one set of actions that suit all their customers? And is there an opportunity here with the Agriculture Act and Environment Bill?
Yeah, I think that's a cracking question, and it's been an awful lot of let the market decide, hasn't it? And the thing is, the interesting thing in sitting where I do in IEMA, we see lots of different sectors. In fact, I was involved in a panel discussion about construction recently, and freight transport, the decarbonisation of freight transport, which, as you can imagine, is quite a knotty issue to tackle. And it's exactly the same problem, that if you are a retailer, you don't want to necessarily pick a winner because you might not get the most innovative one or the one that everybody else decides they want. If you're the government, you don't want to pick a winner because you don't want to stifle innovation. Both of these are absolutely reasonable and understandable positions, but they're kind of mutually incompatible, because what you do is, as you said, you end up with a lot of reinventing the wheel sometimes, a lot of very similar looking schemes that kind of say almost the same thing. And I suppose I'm going to dodge answering the question by giving another example. And that was when I used to be a BBC correspondent, and I did a piece on this about in Austria, where there was a very strong, and probably Cedric knows the Austrian farming market far better than I do, because this was some time ago, but there was a really, really strong collective will amongst the farming community to make sure that the supermarkets decided on one. They did pick a winner. And I spoke to a lot of organic farming representatives at the time, and they had all gone as one to say, well, either you do want our products or you don't. And if you don't, then fine. But if you do, this is what you've got to do. This is the piece of the shelf we need. This is the bit of the chiller that we need. And these are the labels that you're going to have to use. Now, of course, this is very different. You know, there are a lot of countries in Europe where people say, I'll pay an extra 25% for local, sustainably produced produce, and they mean it, as opposed to just saying it and then just buying whatever the cheapest thing is in the supermarket. So, you know, slightly different from us. We have consumers who are supremely price sensitive. But I think that, you know, that point about collaboration, about speaking with one voice, does hold true. You are, to a certain extent, masters of your own destinies if you can get together behind one regime and be really honest about it and really punchy about it. Then there are examples in Europe to show that that can be a very successful strategy.
I do think that probably if you do have one scheme, though, you do need to have some sort of, it needs to be robust and it needs to have some sort of flexibility to it. Because I think it's, you know, if you've just got one, almost a monopoly of a scheme, then it can be open to abuse or not open to innovation.
No,
so
that's true.
It's getting that sort of balance with it, that you do need to, it needs to be moving. And I suppose having some some basic elements to a scheme that or goals that you are trying to achieve, and then how you achieve that within that scheme, then that might be the way to do it, rather than say you must do this, must do very, very sort of prescriptive.
No, I agree, and you don't want to stifle innovation, and you also don't want to, you know, I was a journalist for 20 years, and I can tell you, you know, a whiff of hypocrisy in anything, and that is going to get a journalist. Well, you still are, Cedric, of course. I've been a journalist longer than I have now, and well, as you know, I mean, anything that sounds, you know, a bit too good to be true, but or might have a bit of a, you know, a few problems under the bonnet, you will immediately go and do the story, because that's the point of being a journalist. So yes, you're right. I mean, you know, robust and flexible.
Sorry, go on, Caroline.
Just to add to that, obviously Cedric, our former board meeting member, joking, Cedric. I mean, I think that from a LEAF Marque perspective, I think we would agree. And this is where actually being a provider, say, for example, in the farm to fork policy across Europe is going to be key. And for us to drive change, our ultimate drive is for supporting farmers to be more sustainable, and LEAF Marque is one of those routes. And so if there are partners that we can work with on a global scale as equivalents or through franchises and things like that, those are the sort of models that I think we're going to increasingly look at. Because yes, I mean, you do need competition, because if you don't have competition, you don't have the drive and you don't have the sense of urgency. And everybody sort of kind of rests on their laurels and say, yeah, we're there now, sort of thing. Yeah, of course, it's sustainable. And it isn't. So, yeah.
I feel I must owe you an apology, Sarah. I referred to Cedric as a renowned journalist in my opening gambit, but I forgot to mention that you were one as well. So I do apologize.
Oh, no, that's quite right. Yes, he is. You're not wrong. Many's the time I've nicked a story off Cedric.
All right.
For a piece on the telly.
I don't feel so bad then.
And me off you in the day. Journalists love him.
That's true, yes. Yeah. Another question here. There is a role for consumers here. There's been too much emphasis on cosmetic standards in food. If all food retailers sold produce that is not perfect as standard, then consumers will just buy what is on offer. This would potentially reduce food waste, reduce pesticide use, and result in better soil health, water quality, and biodiversity, among other benefits. How do we move away from the perception of perfect food, do you reckon?
Well, I'll quickly start, because yes, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you talk to all retailers, which I used to do when I was a journalist, and they'd say, oh, well, you know, you can see where people don't buy if they have this product A and product B, and product B doesn't look quite as good as product A. But you know what? I think I don't think people worry that much. Again, it's back to this thing about price. It's UK consumers are almost uniquely, I mean, perhaps American shoppers as well, but certainly Anglo-American shoppers are very driven by price. And if you can display it in the right way and tell the story, tell the narrative, people love those things. I mean, okay, everybody wants to get in and out of the supermarket as quickly as possible, particularly at the moment, but you will see the eye begins to linger around the stories that are told around the farmers who are producing particular products, and the story and the narrative that's around that. A lot of advertising for processed stuff is around this narrative. And to be able to give that narrative to help consumers understand that otherwise this is going effectively in the bin, and that's just criminal, particularly when so many people are really, really struggling to put food on the table. I think, you know, there's a real opportunity. I know that some supermarkets have done it, and to be honest, I don't know how successful that has been. But then again, it's kind of in a big bag along with everything else. You know, it's not. There's no kind of, oh, look at this, because of course it's not a premium product. But maybe we should be thinking slightly differently of how we define premium.
I think there's an education element as well, in terms of, I think people are more concerned about the environment and more interested in it, and you know, and media has a part to play in that, but also that sort of education, and of course that sort of starts at the younger age, of people actually knowing what their food is, where it comes from, and you know what it's made into, and process of doing that. And I suppose, I'm obviously from that LEAF, the LEAF role there in terms of LEAF education, Open Farm Sunday, is so important. And I think you were saying, Caroline, about perhaps more disillusioned youth, but I think much more engaged youth, and they don't stand for any crap. So we need to be responding to that, and the world's sort of strongest environmentalist is a 18-year-old girl. I mean, it's how do we sort of respond to that and help educate people? I mean, everyone in the world eats about a ton of food every year, so you do need to be moving that around. You have to be producing that and moving it around, and that's a difficult process, and it involves doing stuff to the land, and it involves carbon and all this sort of stuff. But trying to reduce that impact, but also explaining the importance of that impact, that you need to have that. Without that food, then the world does stop running. And I think the crisis of the last year has sort of shown that, and people do value food. They probably cooking the food more. So how can we build on that as well?
I mean, obviously that's a perfect plug. We've got online Farm Sunday this Sunday, and of course later in June we hope we'll have the face-to-face on Open Farm Sunday. And as you say, Cedric, we've got Janet is here from LEAF Education, and what a wonderful team of really first-class educators. And I look at the regional education consultants and see how they weave the story of farming into absolutely every topic in school, building the trust with teachers, building the capability of farmers, and all of that drives the change. And but when you look at Marks and Spencers or Waitrose or the retailers, where are their complaints that they get? And it will be principally around, we've got a bug in the sandwich and things like that. So getting people to understand the consequences of their action, and as you say, Cedric, that power that we have as individuals to help drive change is something that we've often kind of neglected, and we need more of it.
Thank you all. I think we've got time for one more question, and this is more in relation to the pandemic. Coronavirus has generated some major changes in how we purchase and consume food. Which of these changes do you think might remain, and what is the likely impact going to be on farmers?
Well, I think I'd preface it, I should declare an interest here, because I also sit on the National Food Strategy Advisory Board, and we have a lot of conversations about this kind of thing, as you could imagine, or have had. I think we must be under no illusions that for many people, this has just not been an opportunity to bake banana bread and, rediscover your inner cook. It's been trying to feed kids in crappy social housing, which is badly insulated, and probably sharing one microwave between 5 or 6 households. And so, it's not going to be, it's just as bad, it's worse than it was. And it has never been particularly good. So we need to remember that those are people out there who just need help to put fresh fruit and vegetables on the table regularly. Having said that, you do notice that vegetables run out quite a lot faster in the supermarket when I do my shop. That things like tomato puree and those sort of things are things that you use as a building block for a sauce. I mean, it has been a phenomenal shift, as Cedric said, from eating out to entirely home cooking. And I think, the food system and the food sector, farmers absolutely included, should be praised to the rafters for that. I suspect everybody will be trying to eat out as soon as we can. So that's going to be another shift. But it may be that some of that sticks, some of that home cooking, that cooking together and understanding the building blocks of food and where your food comes from sticks. I hope it does. Even if it sticks with 0.5% of the population, it will be a big change in the work that the food and farming sector has to do in explaining that story.
Yeah, I think so. I totally agree, Sarah. And also I think the value of food and how people value food. And as you say, those for some people it is desperate just feeding people. And certainly here, but also the UN was saying that there's a pending food crisis in 30 countries over the next year or so, and so that value of food globally. So we need to be thinking about everyone in this country, but also people globally as well, as how they feed themselves, and it all ties in with these sort of global issues of climate change and whatever, and you'd like to think there is some sort of collective, almost sort of moral response about the virus affected everyone, and food poverty can affect so many people and ultimately affect the well-being of everybody. So perhaps some of those lessons we've learned in terms of people, we're all in this together, although obviously people are not in it together to the same extent, but to have some sort of common goals, and the SDGs are very worthy, but actually putting some of those into practice is. But yeah, no, it is very, very difficult. But I think that should be the food legacy, if you like, that trying to feed as many people as possibly.
Government could take a really good lead in some of this through procurement, in particular.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Purchasing of LEAF Marque or Soil Association, all the wonderful work that they've done in that space. And yes, it's interesting when, as you say, Northern Ireland and Queen's University have done a huge amount of work in this. And as you say, the situation has just got worse. But I think some of the statistics are also quite encouraging. So 61% do want to change their lifestyle, and 31% say they have made major changes to the lives that they already live to make it more healthier. So, there's some good things in all of this as well.
Absolutely. I think we're going to wrap it up there because we've gone slightly over, but huge thank you to Sarah and Cedric for joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedule as always. It's been another wonderful discussion. It really has. And yes, it's been great to have you both with us.
Thank you.
Just for everyone else's information, I've just put a link in the chat box just to make you all aware of the remaining 2 surgeries that we've got. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about the future of LEAF Marque, LEAF's next chapter. And Caroline is going to be moving from speaker to panelist. So if you want to see Caroline being grilled and being asked lots of difficult questions, by all means join us. We'll also have as the panelists Jenny Clark, our assurance manager, and Claire Mike, our business development director. And the session will be chaired by the wonderful Lucy Redmore, our senior technical coordinator. So it promises to be a very, very interesting discussion. And of course, we hope you can all join us as well for the launch of our Global Impacts Report on Friday morning at 10 o'clock. So we hope you can join us. But thank you all very much for joining us today. Thank you again to Cedric and Sarah. And we hope to see you again later this week.
Thank
you all.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Sarah, thank you, Cedric.
Pleasure. See you later.
Thank you.
See you soon.